Sunday marked 1 year since the jailing of Brazil's former president Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. Mobilizations were held across the country. Lula, his defense team and supporters maintain his innocence 1 year on, saying that there is no proof, that there was no crime, and that his imprisonment is legally unjustifiable. The main demonstrations were in Curitiba, outside the federal police headquarters where Lula is being held. Our special contributor Michael Fox was there.
The morning rally to defend and demand the release of former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva is just coming to a close here in Curitiba, Brazil. Former presidential candidate for the Workers' Party, Fernando Haddad, has just spoken, as has Workers' Party President Gleisi Hoffmann, who read a letter from Lula to the crowds. Organizers say there's roughly 10,000 people here today. They've come from around the country, northeastern Brazil, Brasilia, and the south. They've come down on buses, all for this one day. They've been organizing for this for at least a couple of months. This is a big day. It's the 1 year anniversary of Lula's imprisonment, and he has been in this jail just in front of us, this federal police prison, for exactly 1 year. And his supporters say it is time for him to be released. They say he's a political prisoner, and they say that he was only brought to jail in order to block him from running in last year's elections. It was an extension of the coup that took out Dilma Rousseff, the impeachment in 2016. And if he had run in last year's elections, he would have won. He did not, and Jair Bolsonaro, far-right president, is now in the presidency. So his supporters say they are not going to stop. João Stegio, who's one of the leaders of the MST, called on the people here to form their own Free Lula committees in their own communities to really demand Lula's freedom and keep the pressure on for the months and the years to come.
That was Michael Fox from Curitiba. And Lula also released a letter to mark the anniversary of his imprisonment. In this letter, he reports being a political prisoner exiled in his own country. He said no piece of evidence was produced against him. The leader also said that his only crime was to dedicate an entire life to building a fair country. He thanked his supporters, who he said will not allow his voice to be silenced, as millions of them continue to share his principles and raise their voices across Brazil. Sao Paulo was one of the other Brazilian cities that saw big protests for Lula. And supporters sang and marched along the Paulista Avenue in the center of the city. For many in Brazil, the former president has become a central symbol of resistance to the right-wing government of President Jair Bolsonaro and his attempts to force through pension reform and the privatization of public assets.
I'm here in the name of freedom for President Lula, because he was arrested because they didn't want the people to control the country anymore. They didn't want the people to have dignity anymore. And this is why they arrested him. And they put Bolsonaro in power.
Let's hear from our correspondent in Sao Paulo, Brian Mir, who has more details.
I'm standing on Paulista Avenue in downtown São Paulo, where thousands of people have gathered on the streets to show their solidarity with former Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva on this, the 1 year anniversary of his unjust and illegal political imprisonment at the hands of Judge Sergio Moro, who went on to become Justice Minister for the man he helped win the elections, Jair Bolsonaro. Now, Lula was allowed to write his first op-ed piece since he was in prison today. And in an article published in Folha do São Paulo, he said, they thought they could shut me up by holding me in solitary confinement, but what they didn't know is that there are millions of Lulas. And these millions of Lulas are the people who support the project for Brazil that he represented with sovereignty, self-determination, national development includes all of the people who were traditionally excluded in this country for the first 500 years of its existence. So today, for 5 hours, thousands of people have come out here to yell Lula livre and see speeches by former presidential candidate Guilherme Boulos, PT President Gleisi Hoffmann, and listen to protest music and to sing along with it. And the mood is positive. There are people telling me they think that Lula's freedom is only a matter of time.
That was Brian Mir from Sao Paulo. And people around the world were also standing in solidarity with the former Brazilian president. In London, supporters took to the top of the iconic red double-decker buses with Brazilian flags and a giant banner which read, "Lula is a political prisoner."
We are here in London on the Free Lula bus. We are movements and activists, both Brazilian and from here in the UK, fighting for Lula's freedom and denouncing the unjust imprisonment. We know why Lula was jailed. It was nothing to do with anything he did. Lula is innocent. If he were free, he'd be president of Brazil today.
And that same solidarity could be seen in northwest England, in cities like Manchester, where supporters held Free Lula and Lula Libre placards. In Germany, rallies were held in Frankfurt and Munich by locals and Brazilians alongside social movements. And in Barcelona, the famous chant, which was heard all around Brazil in the run-up to the 2018 presidential elections, made its way to Europe. They chanted, "Brasil urgente, Lula presidente."
Lula presidente, Brasil urgente, Lula presidente, Brasil.
Colombia's Social Minga leaders and the Colombian government reached an agreement on Saturday night. Representatives of the indigenous Campesino and Afro-descendant communities said they reached a compromise on issues such as human rights, peace, territory, education and health, among others. The government and leaders also agreed that a monetary fund should be created for indigenous people. The communities held protests for almost a month, demanding that the government fulfill a series of agreements which date back to 1991.
I want to inform the indigenous, Campesino, and Afro-descendant people that on Saturday night, we reached an agreement with the government in areas such as peace, human rights, land, and the environment. We also agreed to the reinforcement of the Guard and the fund grant for indigenous people. I also want to say that we are continuing with the Social Minga, and after the Minga mobilizations, we will continue to call for a national strike.
And after making agreements with the Social Minga leaders, Colombian President Iván Duque arrived in the city of Popayán, the capital of the Cauca department. He took to Twitter to announce that he met with local authorities and social representatives, those affected by the damage caused to the Pan American Highway as a result of road blockades. The communities had blocked the road as part of the ongoing protest against the government. And on Saturday, thousands mobilized throughout Venezuela in support of peace and to reject foreign intervention in the country. Caracas residents marched to the Miraflores Palace in defense of sovereignty following weeks of attacks against the country's electrical grid. Demonstrators say that they're standing by their democratically elected government against U.S. imperialism. In other news, a new and promising party has officially entered South Africa's politics. The Socialist Revolutionary Workers Party launched in Johannesburg over the weekend. It will contest next month's general elections. The political organization says that it represents the working class.
It started as a slow day as members of the Socialist Revolutionary Workers Party made their way to this venue in eastern Johannesburg. The program officially kicked off with a song and dance. Shortly after, delegates deliberated intensely before the party's leadership was elected.
We decided that we want a general meeting in Rustenburg is to take everybody.
Socialist Revolutionary Workers Party chairperson Irvin Jim outlined the problems his organization seeks to solve.
We're talking about 30.4 million South Africans today with absolutely no plate of food. Poverty is rife, unemployment and inequalities.
The Independent Electoral Commission has confirmed nearly 27 million South Africans are registered to vote. That's over half of the population. This gives the Socialist Revolutionary Workers Party a fighting chance to win the hearts and minds of South Africans who are frustrated by problems like inequality. But it won't be easy, as other political parties are also sharpening their swords. Some of these organizations include the fast-growing Economic Freedom Fighters, which has also positioned itself as a socialist party for the jobless.
Our main mission is to unite both the working class, organized working class, and the unemployed, and the peasants in the villages, in the rural areas. And what is our agenda? We of the view that this party will succeed by pursuing a revolutionary agenda.
Perhaps that success will be driven by the party's mother body, the National Union of Metal Workers of South Africa. It is among the biggest trade unions in the country and will want to ensure its members vote for its political wing, the Socialist Revolutionary Workers Party.
We have more stories coming up. We'll be back.
Our actions have an impact on the environment. It's our responsibility to change for the sake of our planet. Let's be part of this transition. Watch, preserve, and protect your Green Zone. Wednesdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Libya's government of national accord has announced an operation called the Volcano of Anger. This operation is designed to defend the capital, Tripoli, against Libyan National Army forces which are approaching. Military officers loyal to General Khalifa Haftar have advanced from the east with the aim of taking Tripoli. The Prime Minister has accused Haftar of attempting to carry out a coup. He says rebels will be met with force. From the time the so-called moderate rebels, who were backed by the US and NATO, overthrew Muammar Gaddafi, the country has been in turmoil. The country is now severely divided since NATO's intervention, and many believe it is on the verge of a civil war.
We are pledging to our people that we will preserve the civil state. We are inviting the delusional and brainwashed to surrender their weapons. The battle is over, and we will not allow the militarization of the nation. Libya will not be a military state. Its military will only have loyalty to God and then the nation.
Thousands of Sudanese protesters demonstrated overnight, calling on President Omar al-Bashir to step down. However, al-Bashir has refused to do so, alluding that his opponents need to seek power through the ballot box. Police have used tear gas and stun grenades to disperse protesters as they continue chanting, "Sudan is rising, the army is rising." Meanwhile, Sudanese doctors met in Britain to protest against the al-Bashir government. The doctors accused the government of causing the deterioration of health services in the country.
We are inspired by all the success that happened in Algeria for the peaceful resistance, but it as well highlights that in the presence of an independent army and the lack of violence, and that people are able to practice their right of freedom of expression and assembly, you can succeed and you can reach your goals. While if you compare it to Sudan, where we have faced violation, detention, killing, around almost 60 have died, it's very difficult for us to reach our goal, but we're not going to give up.
Algerians living abroad have been making their way home to take part in protests as they demand a complete overhaul of the government. The protesters have said that the resignation of Abdelaziz Bouteflika is just the beginning, as the rest of the government also has to leave. They are calling these demonstrations the building of a second republic. This marks 7 consecutive weeks of protests in the country.
There was no other option but to come to Algeria to be amongst everyone. We have, like all over the world at the moment, you can see Algerians coming out in their hundreds and thousands to try and come for one main goal and one purpose, is the betterment of the country and the betterment of the nation, and so that people's voices are heard, as you can see. But we had to come to Algeria along with my mum, my family, my cousins, my uncles.
Meanwhile, in Paris, France, thousands of Algerians have joined in celebrating the resignation of the president. His resignation left the country under a caretaker government until the elections are called in 3 months. There is currently no successor in sight.
First of all, I feel security, stability, and a lot of hope. Bouteflika's resignation helped the Algerian people get back what they have the right to have, meaning the keys to their home.
Rwanda's president said that the country has become a family once again, while marking the 25th anniversary of the genocide that killed about 800,000 people. Paul Kagame lit a remembrance flame in the capital, Kigali. Rwandans will mourn for 100 days. That's equivalent to the time it took for about a tenth of the country to be massacred in 1994. Most of those killed were minority Tutsis and moderate Hutus. Attackers were of the ethnic Hutu forces. This crime was not without colonial roots, but was a continuation of a pattern of hostility installed by the Belgians.
In 1994, there was no hope, only darkness. Today, light radiates from this place. Our bodies and minds bear amputations and scars, but none of us is alone. Together, we have woven the tattered threads of our unity into a new tapestry.
The Tunisian president has announced that he will not be running for re-election in November, despite his party calling for him to do so. 93-year-old Beji Caid Essebsi says the time has come to pave the way for someone younger. However, the 2014 adopted constitution gives him the right to run for 2 terms. Essebsi won the first free presidential elections following the 2011 revolution that toppled Zine Abidine Ben Ali, who ruled for 23 years. We're taking one last break. Stay with us.
Who's moving the Jasmine? What interests motivate the actors behind each event?
Se despliega el tablero.
Uncritical Moves investigates every event from Monday to Friday. Only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Palestinian prisoners have announced a plan to start a hunger strike to protest their deplorable conditions along with genocidal violence. The action will be held to protest against the deteriorating situation in various Israeli prisons. Negotiations with Israeli authorities are ongoing. Meanwhile, dozens of Palestinians gather in Ramallah to show solidarity with Palestinian prisoners in Israeli prisons. The president of Iran's parliament, Ali Larijani, has called the unilateralism of Washington and Zionism a danger to the world. He made the remarks in Qatar during the 140th Assembly of the Inter-Parliamentary Union.
The Muslim nations will never accept the policies aligned with the United States and the Zionist regime. The international community has ignored the oppression of the Palestinian people for decades for the benefit of the Israeli regime, so that the poor Palestinian people do not have another remedy than the resistance in their legitimate and unalienable right.
The Ministry of Health in Barbados is preparing a document to take to Cabinet which would provide free health care to CARICOM nationals who reside in the country. This was revealed by Health and Wellness Minister Lieutenant Colonel Jeffrey Bostick. He made the announcement as he delivered the feature address at the opening of the World Health Day activity organized by the Pan American Health Organization. The theme of the World Health Day was Universal Health, Everyone, Everywhere. Bostick said this was consistent with the policy goals of the Barbados government, which prioritizes providing universal access to high-quality healthcare.
A healthcare financing commission will be established with the commissioner given a mandate to deliver on healthcare financing within the next 18 months. And this is urgently needed to underpin the provision of universal health coverage. Some of the major issues which need to be examined include a fair means of raising funds and an agreed guaranteed package of services that people can access when needed, so that we will have a policy in relation to the treatment or providing the provision of health care for all CARICOM residents, whether or not they are skilled nationals who reside in Barbados, because we believe strongly that a threat to public health does not only come from those who call themselves Barbadians, but from all those who live, work, reside, and even pass through here on cruise ships.
Hundreds of Uruguayans held a protest and a concert in support of a law granting rights to trans people. Activists and members of the LGBTQ community gathered in the capital Montevideo in support of the law, which was approved in 2018. The law seeks to protect transgender persons from harm and facilitates changes to official documents. However, a conservative group received enough support to possibly overturn the legislation. They have enough votes to petition the parliament to order a referendum so that people can vote for or against the law.
They are trying to take away that right we have fought so hard for, so we are mobilizing ourselves. Through artistic expression, what we are trying to show people is that we are all united, and that is not going to pass. The trans law will not end. We will continue.
Participants of a marathon in the Chilean capital have paid tribute to the people who were abducted or detained during the dictatorship of Augusto Pinochet. A group from the Association of Families wore white T-shirts with the faces of their loved ones printed on the front and in the back. More than 30,000 people participated in the Santiago Marathon, one of the most important sporting events in the city. Thousands of people were killed, arrested, or abducted during the Pinochet ruling from 1973 to 1990. Migrants joined the migrant rights organizations rallied in the Mexican state of Chiapas on Saturday to protest against deportations. Demonstrators burned figures representing U.S. President Donald Trump and his Mexican counterpart Andrés Manuel López Obrador. The rally was held outside the National Immigration Institute office, where migrants have to process their paperwork and documents. They asked for more protection and demanded a change in migration policies.
A policy that encourages discrimination that Donald Trump is imposing on Mexico. López Obrador has become just another peon of Donald Trump. That's why we burn these effigies. We burn the piñatas to get the public's attention. And this public outcry should pressure these people to change the current immigration policy.
Greek police fired tear gas at hundreds of migrants who were hoping to enter northern Europe on Saturday. The trouble flared outside the Diabate camp after a rumor circulating on social media claimed that travel restrictions had been lifted. According to the rumors, human rights groups were standing by, ready to assist migrants in crossing into North Macedonia and onward to other EU states. The migrants threw sticks and stones at police as they tried to break through. They tried to break through the police cordon and they tried to reach the main road leading to the border. Thousands of protesters marched through the streets of Lausanne, Switzerland, calling on the government to take action against climate change. Demonstrators hope to push for the incorporation of environmental issues in the political agenda, with federal elections scheduled later this year. Protesters can be heard chanting, "We are hotter than the climate." The Hungarian State Opera is reportedly asking its white actors to identify as black in order to stage George Gershwin's opera Porgy and Bess. George and Ira Gershwin's stipulate that the opera must be performed by an all-black cast, especially since it deals with issues in the black community. In 1935, George turned down a hefty commission to have the Metropolitan Opera produce Porgy and Bess. He also turned down Al Jolson because both would have done it in blackface. The Hungarian State Opera performed the show in blackface in the 1970s and in the 1980s. With that, we come to the end of this news brief, but you can read more on these stories by going to our website, telesurenglish.net. For our viewers in Africa, you can find us on StarSat channel 461 in South Africa and 539 in Nigeria, and you can join us on social media. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.
Enjoy the best content.